It's been a very common trope over time that people have always said things like, video games are bad for you, video games are a waste of time, you're never going to get anywhere if you waste all of your time playing video games. It's been an issue that people have been debating for a long time, but it's a much more complex issue than a lot of people give it credit for. See, video games have only really been in the mainstream for maybe the past 20, maybe 30 years. And so we haven't really had a long enough time to really analyze how it's affected the development of kids who've grown up playing it their whole life. Well, as somebody who was born in 1994, and has spent a very large amount of time being addicted to every kind of video game, here are some things that I've learned over time. So first off, let's talk about the Joe Rogan clip from last year, where he said this.
And video games are a real problem. They're a real problem. You know why? Because they're fun.
Addictive.
And you don't, I have a real problem with them. And you do them, and they're real exciting, but you don't get anywhere.
Right.
Now, of course, there have been a lot of counter-arguments to these, especially to the Joe Rogan clip. There were a lot of people saying, well, there are a lot of people who make a living off of video games if you're a professional streamer or if you are into esports. But I think that those are kind of crappy arguments in general because they really only apply to such a tiny minority of people. It's kind of the same as when people say, look how bad video games are. This person played for 200 hours straight and then he died while playing it. Like, trying to use the absolute extremes on both ends is a bad way to show statistical evidence, because those kind of outliers are completely irrelevant to the middle 95%. So let's actually talk about the topic of, are video games a waste of time? Well, to answer that question, you kind of have to break it down a little bit. I think it's kind of silly when people try to talk about the effects of video games as a whole, as if all of them are the same. Because you've got puzzle games, you've got adventure games, you've got strategy games, you've got shooter games. There's so many different types of games, and all of them can have a different effect on you. So I'll be honest, there are certain video games that definitely feel like more of a waste of time than others. And one of the ways I personally distinguish whether a game is a waste of time or not, when it comes to the longer that you play a game, are you progressing your own skills at the game, or are you progressing your in-game character or your in-game progress? I mean, most games it's kind of a combination of both. But for example, World of Warcraft is my #1 most played game in my entire life. I've put in something like 8,000 or 9,000 hours over the past 14 years. And for the most part, the most I can say I've gotten out of it over all that time is some fun memories. You know, it's just a fun, relaxing game where you can go just have fun, socialize, just do things with other people, while constantly gaining more achievements, adding to your collections. But then if my WoW account disappears, or if Blizzard just makes all of the achievements obsolete by giving them out to everybody, which has kind of happened, then I'm really just left with all the fun memories I had along the way. Whereas here are some other games that I've put a lot of time into that feel like I've gotten a little more out of it. So the first example I want to bring up is StarCraft II. Now, I probably played around 2,000 or 3,000 hours of StarCraft II, and if you deleted my StarCraft II account, it would make absolutely no difference, because all of the time I spent on that game was just put towards me building my own skill in the game. So, chess is a strategy game. StarCraft is a real-time strategy game. So with chess, you know, you have plenty of time to look at the board, stare at it, take your time, sort of just plan out your next move, and just take it at your own pace. Whereas with StarCraft, there is no slowing the other person down. It's basically a strategy race. And so you're focusing on building more bases and building your army, building more economy, while scouting the other guy and defending his attacks that are coming in. And you've got to poke at him and try to mess him up and figure out his strategy and try to make your strategy better while constantly just doing 10 things at once. It's just an insanely stressful multitasking practice. Your brain is moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour just the entire time you're playing. And I would say this is probably one of the most beneficial games that I've ever played, because it's really improved just my mental sharpness and my multitasking ability and my strategic thinking. You know, whenever people talk about self-improvement, they talk about, oh, I'll go to the gym to work out my physical fitness, or I'll learn a new skill to improve maybe my economic status. But there are a lot of video games that I would say really just increase your mental sharpness. They get you to keep thinking quick. It's just a lot of mental exercises, similar to like doing math problems or something. And to be honest, back when I was really into my StarCraft II local community, a lot of the other people that played were like really smart guys. Like usually they were getting like masters or PhDs or just getting computer science degrees or just... I'd be willing to say that a large portion of the people I played StarCraft with 10 years ago are probably making 6 figures, just because it takes such a smart person to be that good at that game, and then those smart people can go off to do other crazy things. So that was one game that I was really good at. I actually quit about 5 or 6 years ago because I just couldn't handle the stress anymore. But then there's another game I played quite a lot, some of you probably already know, and that is Guitar Hero. Now, when it comes to Guitar Hero, I run into even more debates where it's like, oh, why don't you learn to play real guitar instead of playing Guitar Hero? I play both, and I can honestly say that I get a lot of the same skill and satisfaction out of playing Guitar Hero as I do playing the real guitar. And that is because they are not as different as a lot of people like to believe they are. Like, sure, the mechanics of the Guitar Hero controller is a lot simpler than the 6 strings and 24 frets of a real guitar. But when you reach a certain level of Guitar Hero, you are still following along with the music. You're able to follow along with the rhythm and the melody. You have a lot of muscle memory, a lot of good reflexes. You learn all about the music theory, and you just have fun playing along with music. But the third game that has been a very big part of my life, mostly just in the past year, that I feel like has been very beneficial to just my mental state, and that is Doom Eternal. So we've talked about a strategy game, a rhythm game, and now a shooter. Now with Doom Eternal, it's a lot of the same talking points you've probably heard before, how it's really good for reaction time, it's really good for reflexes, and just being very good at following objects and having great vision. And again, just having that mental sharpness of being really fast and paying attention to whatever's going on. But something that I love about Doom Eternal more than any other shooter is that you are always going to be alone, and you are pretty much always going to be 1 versus, 10, 20, 30 enemies at a time. And so the extra layer that this adds to it is that you have to be watching your back at all times. You're going to be surrounded, you're getting hit from all sides, you've got to be constantly changing weapons, you're going to be shooting and running and aiming and jumping and doing all kinds of things all at once. And just like with StarCraft, you're just getting so overwhelmed, and it just teaches you how to handle a lot of stress when you're under a lot of pressure. Now, in a game like Doom Eternal, or even, say, a game like Super Meat Boy, there's another skill that I think video games are probably the #1 best thing to teach you at, and that is learning how to fail, and learning how to overcome failure. Because when you think about in real life, if you have a failure, like let's say you fail a test, or you fail at something at your job, or you fail while doing something dangerous, like the consequences can be pretty drastic. You could lose your job, you could get bad grades in school, you could injure yourself or die. Failure can be a really scary thing in real life. But in a video game, if you fail, you just hit restart. Maybe you just lost a few minutes of time and you just start over. You learn from your past mistakes, you say, alright, I'm not going to do that again, I'm going to try it better. And then maybe after your 10th or 20th attempt, then now you've learned a lot of things not to do, and it's taught you how to go about it the right way. I've actually noticed sometimes that if I meet somebody who doesn't really play video games much, if I watch them play a video game and then they mess up and they have to restart, they get really angry, they get really frustrated, and they just don't want to play anymore. And I've noticed that's pretty different from somebody who has played video games, where like if I die on something, I just say, okay, let's do it again. I'll try it a little bit differently. I know I can do better than this. And so I think video games are really great because there's just such a lack of consequences if you do fail. And I think that learning how to fail and learn from your failures is just a really useful skill to have in life, because it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And I think once you're good at learning from it, then it encourages you to take bigger risks. So one other thing that a lot of people bring up is like, why would you spend so much time playing a video game, which is not going to get you anywhere in life, whereas you could spend so much time learning an instrument or a sport, another activity, but it will do more for you in life. But the truth is, I think people lie to themselves a little bit when they talk about how beneficial a lot of hobbies really are. Like guitar, for example. Like I was saying with Guitar versus Guitar Hero. People say, oh, if you spent all that time that you spent playing Guitar Hero and you spent that doing guitar instead, think of where you'd be. And I think of that like, oh, okay, so instead of playing Guitar Hero in my room by myself just for fun, I'd be playing guitar in my room by myself just for fun. Like, anytime it comes to making a living off of a hobby, whether that being like making a living from playing music, or from doing art, or from being an athlete, you're really no more likely to make it in any of those fields than you are in video games. Like, let's be honest. In order to be that top 0.1% where you can actually make a living off of something, that is not an easy accomplishment, no matter what you're doing. So let's compare something like, alright, here there's a 20-year-old who just got into a college basketball team versus a 20-year-old who just got into a League of Legends team or something. And let's also say that the League of Legends player goes to the gym for 30 minutes a night just to stay healthy. I would say that those two people can gain pretty much the exact same benefits from their choice, because they can learn the teamwork, they can learn all the hand-eye coordination and the skill, and of course they can both get plenty of exercise too. Like, I always think it's kind of funny when people say video games are unhealthy. It's like, well, video games are kind of health neutral, and if you were spending all of your time playing video games rather than doing things that are making you healthy, then sure, I guess you could say they are unhealthy, but no more unhealthy than watching TV. But now let's compare something like me playing Doom a whole bunch rather than me snowboarding a bunch. Now I do both, I'm pretty decent at both, and I can say that I get a lot of the same thrills from both of these. But if I make a mistake in Doom, then I can just restart and lose a few minutes, or a few hours if I'm playing Ultra Nightmare. But then on my snowboard, if I go off a big jump and I mess up, then I get bruised and I get beat up, and failure has a much larger consequence in that kind of environment. Which actually happened to me a few days ago. I crashed on a big jump about 3 times and I'm still sore from it. But what I'm trying to get at here is that video games and sports have a lot in common. They both take a lot of mental energy, they both use a lot of hand-eye coordination, and both of which can put you into what's called the flow state. Now, I actually just learned about the flow state maybe in the past year or so, but I can actually relate to it really well. Now, the flow state is when you are so good at something, you are so confident at it, that when you are focused in entirely, and you are just working at your maximum skill capacity, then it's almost like time just slows down, and you are just in the zone. It's really hard to explain to somebody who's never really felt it, but I've felt this in Guitar Hero, I've felt this in Doom, I've felt this in StarCraft, I've felt this while snowboarding, and overall it's just really awesome to be just really good at something. Whether it's a sport, a video game, musical instrument, just any kind of hobby, just get really good at it and it will make you love it even more. So now let's just finish off. I'm going to talk about a bunch of different types of games and the pros and cons to each genre of game. Because like I said, people just oversimplify video games in general as being a waste of time in general. So first of all, let's talk about World of Warcraft. Yes, the downside is it can be very time consuming and it can just feel like you're not gaining anything out of it other than the progress of the game. But some of the upsides of it is that, one, I know a lot of people who are very social in the game. Like, maybe they're not very social in real life, but online is the one place that they can make friends and they can talk to people. Now, I personally was never like that. For most of my time playing WoW, I was only ever doing things solo. But one of the major things that I always took out of WoW was its very well-structured system of accomplishments. Basically, here's your quest. Go do this thing. Alright, there's my goal. My goal is to go accomplish this, and then here's my reward afterwards. Alright, now my next goal is to go do this thing, and then I will get this reward out of it. And so it's really good to just teach you to be goal-oriented, and to just say, alright, if you do this thing, then you will get this in return. And that can be a really cool thing, because there's not a lot of things in real life that are that straightforward, and just show you that level of consistent progression. Now let's talk more about like story-driven or role-playing games, you know, like The Last of Us or Skyrim. Now these kind of games are only a slight touch above watching a movie. Like, they're not really meant to challenge you. They're more just meant for leisurely, enjoy the story, enjoy the atmosphere, which can be pretty fun. But again, they're not the kind of games that you feel like you gain a lot of benefit from, like I've talked about earlier. See, people talk about how playing video games is a waste of time, but I would say that watching TV and movies is just as much, if not more, of a waste of time than video games. Because if you measure it in how much you are actually making your brain work, I would say the movies are at the bottom, but then you've got simpler games, and then more complex games, and then really intense games above that. But yeah, I would say that these story kind of games are pretty much just long interactive movies. They're more just meant for fun. I mean, there's no esports related to it. You're not really going for like high skill kind of gameplay. And then you have games like Dota or League of Legends, which are very good team-based games, I would say. So you learn how to work with a team, you learn how to communicate with others, just like every game, lots of hand-eye coordination, lots of strategizing, and it's pretty similar to playing something like baseball or basketball. Then you have games like Minecraft, where I would say that Minecraft is just this generation's Legos. Except Minecraft is a whole lot cheaper, because Legos are freaking expensive. So I would say that with Minecraft, you can build your creativity, you can maybe do it as a social game, and you can have fun times with it. But overall, again, it feels like not a game you're gonna get much out of. But in conclusion, the whole point is that video games are meant to stimulate your brain. Now, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Some people say that it kind of gets you too used to the instant gratification of accomplishing a goal and getting an instant reward. And especially with games being made so easy these days, people just get lazy and they expect everything in life to be that easy. But if you play the right kind of games and you put in a lot of effort, it's really just meant to keep up your mental sharpness, increase your hand-eye coordination level. They can also really improve your problem-solving ability. I mean, in a way, a video game is just, let's put a problem in a controlled environment, set the rules, give you the controls, and then tell you to accomplish this certain goal under this set of rules. And then, yes, I suppose maybe you'll become a streamer or an esports pro gamer. Anyways, I hope you got something out of this video. This video has essentially been 26 years in the making. I've spent countless hours in video games, and I'll spend countless hours more in the future.